Hello, my dear friends. How are you doing? Hope you are having an amazing day and not having to deal with drama. Ready for new stories I have for you today? Let's go to the first one. And don't forget to listen to the end of the story, guys, to hear my insights. Enjoy the stories, and don't forget to like and subscribe. And of course, don't forget to leave a comment. When I was 14, I found out something that turned my world upside down. My dad had cheated on my mom when I was just a baby. And as a result, I have a half-sister, now 18 female, that I had never met or even known about. I grew up as the youngest of 5 kids, with 4 older brothers, and I'd always wanted a sister. I can't even explain the mix of emotions I felt when I found out. There was anger, sure. I was upset that my dad had hurt my mom, but there was also excitement. The idea that I had a sister out there, someone who was actually younger than me, felt like a strange and unexpected gift. My mom found out about the affair when she noticed that my dad was making child support payments to someone she didn't know. At that point, I think she had already suspected something was off, but that was the confirmation she needed. When the truth came out, she kicked my dad out of the house for a few weeks. It was an intense time for our family. My brothers were angry, my mom was devastated, and I remember feeling like the ground had been ripped out from beneath me. My brothers were angry, my mom was devastated, and I remember feeling like the ground had been ripped out from beneath me. But eventually, she took him back, and they reconciled under one major condition. My dad was never to have any contact with the affair baby, as she called my half-sister, and my mom didn't want to hear or see anything about her. As far as she was concerned, my half-sister didn't exist. Even though my mom had set that boundary, 14-year-old me was dying to know my sister. I don't know if it was because I grew up surrounded by brothers and craved that sisterly bond, or if it was just curiosity, but I couldn't stop thinking about her. I asked my dad repeatedly to tell me more about her, and while he was reluctant at first, out of fear of upsetting my mom, he eventually gave me her name and told me I could reach out to her on social media. He also asked me not to tell my mom. So I looked her up. My half-sister, who I'll call Sarah, was already aware of the whole situation. Her mom had been very open with her about everything, including the fact that she had half-siblings. She had always been curious about us, but never reached out of respect for my dad and the situation with my mom. When I messaged her, she was thrilled to finally get to know me, and we hit it off almost immediately. Building a relationship with Sarah. Sarah and I became really close, but I didn't tell my mom about our growing relationship. It was awkward, keeping that part of my life hidden, but I knew how much it would hurt my mom if she knew. So I kept our friendship a secret. We would meet up outside of my home or at Sarah's place, and over time, she became like the sister I never had. My dad knew we were in contact, but he stayed out of it and didn't say anything to my mom. Fast forward to about 2 years ago, when Sarah and I started talking about moving out of our parents' houses. We were both around the same age, but ready for some independence, and it seemed like the most natural thing in the world for us to move in together. It made perfect sense. We got along so well, and we both needed a roommate in the same area. The only issue was how my mom would react. I was nervous about bringing it up, but I knew I had to. I sat my mom down and asked her how she would feel if I moved in with Sarah. She didn't take it well at first, but eventually, she told me that as long as she didn't have to see or hear about my half-sister, she would be fine with it. I took her words at face value, thinking she had accepted the situation as long as she could maintain her distance. I figured I could keep my mom and Sarah separate. When I wanted to spend time with my mom, I'd just go to my parents' house or meet up with her elsewhere. Moving in together. Sarah and I found a cute little apartment and moved in together. It was great. Living with her was like living with a best friend. We had similar interests, and it felt like we were making up for lost time, bonding over all the things we had missed out on growing up apart. For the first few weeks, everything seemed fine. My mom didn't ask too many questions about the apartment, and I made sure to visit her at my parents' house often so she wouldn't feel left out. I thought we had found a way to balance everything. But then my mom told me she wanted to come visit my new place. I had assumed she wouldn't want to, given the situation, but I was wrong. When she came over, Sarah was at home. I didn't think it was a big deal, but my mom's entire demeanor changed the second she saw her. She became cold and distant, barely acknowledging Sarah's presence. After an awkward few minutes, she pulled me aside and asked if I could ask Sarah to leave for a while so she could visit me in peace. I was floored. I had never expected her to ask me to kick Sarah out of her own apartment. I told my mom that Sarah wasn't going to leave and that this was her home too. My mom got upset and said that I should have known she didn't want to be around Sarah at all, even though she hadn't made that clear. I explained that I thought her earlier statement about not seeing or hearing from Sarah just meant she wouldn't come around when Sarah was home or that we'd visit her at my parents' house. But apparently, in her mind, I was supposed to know that she expected Sarah to either leave or hide in her room like some sort of secret whenever she visited. It was like a switch flipped. My mom accused me of betraying her by moving in with Sarah in the first place, despite saying she was fine with it. She claimed that I had chosen Sarah over my real family, and that I was hurting her every time I invited her over when Sarah was around. The fallout. A few weeks later, my mom came to visit again, and once again Sarah was at home. This time, my mom wasn't interested in pulling me aside for a private talk. She made a scene. She yelled that I had disrespected her by forcing her to be around the daughter of my dad's affair, and that I had betrayed her as a daughter by moving in with Sarah. My mom stormed out and went completely no contact with me. She blocked me on everything, phone, social media, and told my brothers that she didn't want to hear my name anymore. I tried to reach out to her multiple times, apologizing for the misunderstanding, but she was completely shut off. It's been months now, and I haven't heard from her. My dad, who knows about the situation but is trying to stay neutral, keeps telling me to give her space and that she'll come around eventually. But I don't know if that's true. My brothers have also taken sides. 2 of them agree with my mom and think I was wrong to move in with Sarah, while the other 2 think my mom is being irrational and needs to get over it. It's caused a lot of tension in our family, and I don't know how to fix it. I love my mom, but I also love Sarah. It's not fair to ask me to cut my half-sister out of my life when none of this is her fault. But now my mom won't even speak to me, and I'm starting to wonder if I really did betray her by moving in with Sarah. So, Reddit. Am I the a-hole for moving in with my half-sister, even though my mom said she was fine with it, only to go no contact with me after realizing she wasn't? OP is not responsible for her mom's unresolved feelings about the affair. She has every right to feel hurt by what OP's dad did, but it's unfair to take that out on OP or her half-sister, who had absolutely no say in how she came into the world. OP built a bond with her sister, and that's valuable, and OP's mom's refusal to accept that doesn't mean she should cut her out of her life. She said she was fine with it, but clearly, she wasn't being honest, and that's on her, not OP. OP needs to give her time and space, but should not feel guilty for living her life and maintaining that relationship. And now let's hear the community's opinion. You're the a-hole. I get that you're excited about having a sister, but you're being really dismissive of your mom's feelings. She's been through a lot, and it's clear that the existence of your half-sister is a painful reminder of your dad's betrayal. You might think she's being unreasonable, but her emotions are valid. By moving in with your half-sister, you've essentially chosen to prioritize that relationship over your mom's comfort and boundaries. I understand you want to have a relationship with your sister, but it seems like you didn't fully consider the impact this would have on your mom, and now it's blown up in your face. You could have handled this with more empathy and care. Everyone sucks here, but mostly your mom. I get why this is a sensitive topic for her, and I'm sure seeing your half-sister reminds her of a painful chapter in her life. But she should never have said she was okay with you moving in with Sarah if she wasn't. That's on her for not being honest about her boundaries. On the other hand, it's possible you could have been more considerate of how deep this wound goes for your mom. You're in a tough spot, and I don't think you're an a-hole, but maybe you could have handled her visits with a little more tact, knowing how she feels. Not the a-hole. Your mom is putting you in an impossible situation by asking you to hide your half-sister or make her leave whenever she visits. That's just plain unreasonable. The fact that she agreed to you moving in with Sarah, but then got angry when you did, only shows that she wasn't being honest about her feelings from the start. You deserve a relationship with your sister, and it's not right for your mom to cut you off for something that's completely out of your control. You didn't betray her. You're just living your life. I hope your mom can get past her hurt and reconnect with you. But until then, keep being true to yourself. I moved back to my home country after my son was born. Husband came to the birth, and we decided that it's better for us to stay here as a family. My son was born with medical issues that are best addressed here. The problem is that his mom is widowed, and she's not accepting it. She lives in my husband's home country. She's not alone, though. His divorced sister lives with her. However, mother-in-law said she needs to have her son with her, just for his company. She takes care of herself, but his sister doesn't want the responsibility. His mom threatened that she would disown him as her son and never speak to him again if he doesn't come back to live with her. He tried reasoning with her and telling her that he's now a dad and his responsibilities changed, and that he wants to be there for his son and raise him. She's having none of it though, and says it's okay if he doesn't see his son for 1.5 years or more, expecting that pandemic will be better, my son will be better, and I'll move back to their country. But that's not happening. I refuse to move back. My husband doesn't want to spend time away from his son just to keep his mom company, glorified chauffeur and babysitter. Since she doesn't listen to reason, how can my husband stay with me and my son without ruining his relationship with his mother? He respects her and doesn't want to cut ties with her. He's in a difficult position. I would be so upset if my mom decided to not speak to me anymore. But thankfully, my mom is a very understanding woman and always encouraged me to follow whatever path led me to be successful. He is raised in a family that never left the village they're from. He'd be the first to do so. He should tell her it's okay if she doesn't see her son for 1.5 years. He can't. She's already ruined the relationship with that ridiculous request. He can either abandon his wife and child for years because his mom is bored, or he can make a stand and let his mother choose whether she's really willing to give up on a relationship with him because he's choosing his wife and child over her. If I were your husband, I'd have to be telling her, "Are you really willing to abandon your son because I won't abandon my son?" She's an ultimate manipulator and thoroughly awful. I think your husband might do well having a couple of sessions with a neutral party, just to get some perspective about his mother. Sure, he's standing up for you and your son, as he should, but the guilt can be crippling. Either way, stay or go, he'll be under a huge amount of guilt. You adding your opinions is fantastic, and I know he's listening to you. But it wouldn't take much for him to get a nagging little voice in his head once she starts with the, your wife's an independent woman, she'll be fine. Or even, your wife's a manipulator, she's trying to come between a son and his mother. If he goes to a neutral party, it'll help a lot, I reckon. Update. My husband decided to stay in my country because that's what's best for me and our baby. His mom still isn't speaking to him. However, she did pull the "I'm sick" card. She went and had lab tests done, and it's just a UTI. For now, he's communicating through his sister, who seems to have come around. She said, "Don't throw away your future." I'm quite shocked that she changed her tune, and it makes me wonder if she has something planned. She complained how come we don't send pictures of our little boy anymore, which seemed a bit entitled to me, but I just rolled my eyes. We sent the sister a picture, and she said when she showed it to her mom started crying. I'm thinking since she's still trying to garner pity, that she will eventually speak to her son again. My husband is not in a good mental state because of all of this, though. I'm trying my best to make sure there are no issues between us and that he stays content and eventually goes back to being happy. So this weekend was our cousin's wedding. Me and my sister booked the same flight so we could go together. We were supposed to leave Friday afternoon. I did. She didn't. That's because when we boarded the plane, she couldn't fit in the seat. She's very overweight and has gained more weight since the last time she flew a couple years ago. She's probably obese now. So she was trying to squeeze into the seat, but even with the armrest up, she would have required both seats to herself. I wouldn't have been able to fit comfortably. As she was trying to make herself fit, she was getting more agitated and upset. That's understandable. Eventually, she had to give up and accept she'd need to get a later flight with 2 seats. At this point, she started yelling at me. She first insisted I go with her on the later flight. I refused because my budget is tight and I didn't want to pay for that. Then she got pissed and said, "But why should I have to spend money then?" She later said, "Remember, this is all her screaming on the fully booked plane while everyone is staring at us. If you knew this would happen, you should have bought another ticket." She's referring to how I gently suggested months back when planning the flight, "Maybe you should get 2 seats, just in case." She got extremely offended and hung up on me. It took days before she'd respond to my messages. After that, I was like, okay, whatever. That's her choice. So we finished planning with her insisting she'd be fine with 1 seat. Then, of course, you saw how that worked out. So she was saying I should have just gone ahead and bought that second seat myself for her, since I knew. I was like, what the duck? And soon the stewardess came and told her to get off the plane and reschedule her flight because of the scene she was making. She went out cursing at me and calling me an entitled bee. It was so embarrassing. I wanted to curl up and pretend I had no idea who she was. Everyone was staring, and there were people recording it on their phones. Okay, so she gets off. I fly ahead, and she gets a later flight that night. The first thing she said when she got to the hotel, we shared a room, was, "If you caused me to miss the wedding, I would never speak to you again." At that point, I just feel like I need to placate her, or the weekend will be nothing but drama. And she has a history of derailing other people's events with drama anyway, so I'm like high alert for this to try to stop it. So I apologized for the way things had happened and said I was happy she'd made it. She rolled her eyes, but stopped arguing. The rest of the weekend was okay, I guess. We didn't talk much. She went around telling other people I'd abandoned her at the airport, but other than that, I mean, she didn't duck up anything for our cousin, so that's what I really cared about. When I explained things from my side to my parents, they took her side and said she's just a sensitive person and I should be more understanding. Then Sunday afternoon comes, and there's the same issue. She already rebooked a different flight for that day with 2 seats, but then she starts up again as I'm getting ready to leave with passive-aggressive comments about how it's my fault for not making her get 2 seats from the start. And let me know when you're home. I'll still be here, gonna be here for hours, but that's better than being a burden on you. That was last night. We haven't spoken since. She's posted more vague passive-aggressive things on Facebook. Things about some people and that kind of phrasing. I'm just not here for this. I'm not a patient person from the start, and she really wears my patience. We were closer when we were younger, but when we were teens, I realized she thinks the rest of the world should orbit her, and I just don't care. Why is it my responsibility to buy her a second ticket anyway, with my own money, after she screamed at me on the phone? I don't want to have to deal with this. She's a grown adult for duck's sake, and she threw a public tantrum. Not for the first time even. How should I respond to this? My default is to ignore everything I can and just respond with short statements or questions to what I can't. That seems to make her more angry, but if I argue and get upset too, I just feel crappy. Also, if I argue, it just gives her more to use against me. I'm sick of her way of thinking anything unfortunate that happens to her is someone else's fault. If your sister wants to embarrass herself, she's free to do so. But she was a jerk, and now doesn't want to take responsibility for her actions. Let her pout and stew. Don't argue, but don't engage either. Maybe it's time to distance yourself from her if she continues hurting you like this. I'm glad she embarrassed herself. She deserved it. I'm sorry she embarrassed you. I'm also glad you refused to buy her another ticket. That was her job, and she knew it. She's just victimizing herself, and that won't get her anywhere in the long run. Keep sticking up for yourself. Do not become her doormat. She needs to grow up and take responsibility for herself. This sounds outright like denial. She's blaming you to avoid facing the truth about her body. I suggest you politely inform her that you aren't going to tolerate her blaming you for something that was her own fault, and until she is ready to discuss without anger, you aren't willing to stay in contact. I was given some jewelry and antiques from my paternal grandmother when she passed. I'm not a jewelry person, and I don't really care for thick, masculine, dark antique furniture. I'm not very close with my paternal side of the family, minus Grandma, and when she passed, I didn't discuss what I got with them. My parents know I got a lot of things from Grandma. They know we were pretty close. I would travel to see her 3 times a year, even in college. We talked on the phone weekly. Grandma had a lot of furniture left over from her husband. She didn't really like it that much. Her personal taste tended to be a lot of lighter stuff. So when she passed, she left me a whole storage unit filled with 200-plus-year-old furniture, which was worth a lot of money. There were some things that were even older. I kept 4 things for my inheritance: a painting Grandma made of us, an old Chinese vase, wedding ring set, and an antique grandfather clock. That was it. The rest was sold, and the money used to pay off my student debt, buy a new car, and put into savings. I also went on a trip to visit my boyfriend while he was studying in Japan. Grandma passed 5 months ago, and I am still sad she is gone. However, I have not been visited by anyone on the paternal side since the funeral. Cousin, 29 female, and aunt, 53 female, were in town and asked to visit with me. I knew something was up because cousin never really wants to hang out. We have never really gotten on. I do like aunt though. We are still not close, and I don't really make a point to keep up with them. During the visit, they asked where I was keeping Grandma's furniture. I said that I had sold it and used the money towards building a life. I have never seen people fall apart quicker. I didn't realize they would feel a personal attachment to furniture that didn't belong to them and hadn't been used in more than 20 years. Cousin and aunt both listed very specific items they were hoping to buy from me, for a few $100 a pop. I told them even if the furniture had been around, I wouldn't have let it go for a quarter of its asking price. This has caused a rather big mess. Apparently, selling furniture without informing family members is considered a huge problem, and aunt was horrified I don't seem concerned or upset. I am not, to be honest, and they wouldn't have been able to pay me the real cost of the furniture and jewelry. I got close to $55,000 for the whole lot. I am just wondering if there's something I'm missing. I don't really have a lot of connection to things. A few sentimental items maybe, but I think cousin assumed she was getting piece of furniture in the will, didn't, then tracked down who did, hoping they would give it to her. I'm not sure. They left in tears, and I am just now getting calls from my parents telling me I shouldn't have sold these things without asking family first. I am just not sure if they are entitled to be upset at me so much. Who knows? I don't. Please advise. Well, you could have handled it a bit better by getting it appraised and then given priority to family to buy it. To be honest, it was a bit of a social faux pas on your part. I would apologize for not contacting them, but stay firm on the rest. You seem to have very little empathy. The least you could have done was found out the cost and let the family know that you had no use for the furniture and would be willing to sell it for X price. Just because the jewelry and furniture meant nothing to you doesn't mean that someone else in the family wouldn't have liked to save it. Throughout my academic career, I always had excellent grades. For the first few years of school, my brother did too. But by the time puberty hit, they were faltering noticeably. This gave rise to a rather unhealthy pattern. My brother would procrastinate his schoolwork, then start crying about being unable to finish it the night before, and my parents, who are both immigrants and not academics, would beseech me to write it for him. I did that for years. I was young and naive, and in all honesty, it did give me a certain sense of superiority over him when I was a kid. So yeah, when my parents begged me to just get him that A, I complied. Large parts of his schoolwork all throughout his high school career were written by me, including some presentations that influenced his final GPA, or the equivalent of GPA in our country, noticeably. As university started getting serious for me and he had finished high school, I put my foot down and more or less stopped this pattern. I realized how unhealthy it was for him, allowing him to keep up with his procrastination and immature behavior. Additionally, for lack of a better term, I grew a spine. Being out of home and increasingly independent, I started valuing my time too much, especially as his schoolwork became increasingly complex and time-consuming. Throughout his university career, his grades were correspondingly a crap show. I can't say I always stayed strong, especially now with pandemic. I did on 2 occasions, both of which had my father crying on the phone to me, do an assignment for him in order to get him to pass a class. The problem now is that my brother's bachelor's thesis is coming up, and my father is already angling for me to, if not write it outright, be heavily involved. I will not, cannot, and do not want to do this. It's unhealthy, morally wrong, and I have neither the time nor inclination. My parents are immigrants from a culture that values boys' education over girls. They want their children to be integrated, to succeed, my brother especially. I'm a damn good student, but basically, in their eyes, it is necessary for my brother, their heir, to get a good degree. There's also a sense of entitlement to women's work in that culture. Me helping him is part of my duty in order to avoid him being emasculated by failing where I succeed. This culture heavily benefits my brother, who is, bluntly put, just lazy. He isn't stupid. He's just learned time and time again that if he cries, Dad will get me to do it. By now, he has great gaps of knowledge that I doubt he would be able to fill, even if he started working on his own. As my father has been angling for my help with his thesis, I have remained firm. This is already leading to arguments with both him and my mother. Please, just one more time, don't you want him to succeed in this country? And my brother, who's mainly bawling about being unable to do the thesis himself. This latter part is true. I have serious doubts about his abilities to write the thing himself, and would put his chances at failing his degree without help at more than 50%. Please, guys, How do I handle this? Advice from people in similar situations? You stand firm. You tell them that his education is in fact not more important than yours, and you will not sacrifice any time away from your education for his any longer.